Hey everybody, today we're talking RAM. You'd think it'd be easy to find the perfect stick of RAM with as many options as we have today, but that's not always the case, as I found out. So today we're going to take a look at taking our RAM, pulling the heat spreaders off, and painting it to match our system perfectly. So to get started, we need to take a look at how our RAM's held together. Now with this LPX, it's basically just two separate heat spreaders stuck to each side, and they just line up. There's nothing actually holding one to the other, but a lot of these will have some sort of clip or maybe some sort of hinge mechanism where they all tie together. So you'll have to look at your RAM because every model is a little bit different. This one's going to be pretty easy. All we've got to do is pry one side, then we can pry the other side off. So what we can do, as I drop stuff, is either try to use our fingers to see how far we get, which actually we're making some progress. You just want gentle pressure on this. You don't want to try to rip it off because you don't want to bend this stick too much. I'm actually going to go down here to the other side, and I like using just a little pry tool that you get with like a phone repair kit, but you can use a screwdriver, but you've got to be very careful because if you scratch any of those traces, you're probably going to ruin that stick of RAM. So be very careful with metal screwdrivers. That's why I like these little plastic tools. We're just going to go in here, find a spot where there's not a lot of circuitry or components on the surface, and just kind of pry on it a little bit and try to get that tape to release. Corners are usually the best place to start too. We might start at the top. Since these aren't joined together, we'll be able to get in there and pull apart from the top down and pinch our finger in the middle of it. But that'll keep us from really tearing this stuff up too much. Alright, so there you go. There's our adhesive tape. I think this is a fabric style. I've already taken one of these apart. So actually I know it's a fabric style, which means basically there's some fabric in here that keeps this all together and it doesn't rip apart real bad, which is kind of handy. So we can take that tape off and trash it. We're not going to reuse it. You can see we've got one side off that has our chips on it. The other side doesn't have chips. So we'll pry on that. Let's say you're not want to put too much pressure to it because you can break that stick of RAM. You just want like a gentle pressure, and hopefully that will give up. So now we can just gently pry, and it's just slowly working its way down the adhesive. All right. Now you'll notice that this side has some foam on it. And what that is to space that heat spreader out so it sits flush or sits right. This side we've got the chips to hold it out. This side there's a little bit of foam that they adhere to make sure that everything sits straight. So we can set this stick to the side with our other one. We can also pull this tape off. Now we'll want to go back and clean up any adhesive that's left by this tape. A lot of times this stuff just rubs off, but you can also use some alcohol and alcohol soaked rag to kind of get it off. It's just regular adhesive. So we've got the adhesive off. Now we are also going to take off this little sticker, this metal sticker on the other side, because I want to put that back on after I paint. So I'm going to take an X-Acto knife and just try to slide it in there and get behind it, and just can slide down behind it, pry it off. Now we'll set this to the side, and after we're done painting, we'll stick it back on. On the back side, we've got our sticker with our model number on it, and I really like keeping this. I'll either peel it off and stick it on the original box, or I'll put it in with some paperwork for the computer. And that way, if anything ever goes wrong, I can get the exact model number or a really close match to replace the stick, or if I want to add more on later, I can also go back, see the model number, and order the same thing. Now with some sticks of RAM, you may have to use a heat gun or a hairdryer to help heat up that adhesive to make it pop off easier. But that's all going to be dependent on what stick you have. I have been lucky enough so far that I've never actually had to use heat to get this stuff off. It's always a little bit of a fight, but it usually pops off without actually adding heat to it. Now that we've got our stickers off and all the adhesive kind of cleaned up, we can get this ready for paint. And what we're going to do first is take a red Scotch-Brite pad, and this is a medium grit kind of deal, and we're just going to scuff this up so the paint has something to bite on. Now that everything's scratched up, we're ready for paint, and I'm going to be using an etch primer along with some navy blue spray paint that matches the rest of my build. And I'm only going to be painting one side of these. Now there are heat spreaders, and this is a case with this set that have gaps along the top that if I was going back over this black with a light color like white, I might actually spray the inside of this as well, so you didn't notice that color change if you saw it from an angle. Luckily, this blue is going to be pretty close to the black, and I don't think it's going to be noticeable, so I'm not going to worry about it. But I will go and get these sprayed up, then we'll come back, stick them on our ram sticks, and we'll be able to check out the finished product. Now we've got everything painted, and it's time to turn all this stuff into a full stick of ram. You can see I've already got one put together. It turned out very nice. So let's see how we actually do that. The first thing we want to do, and I probably should have mentioned this before, but I think I forgot. Sometimes it's pretty handy to mark what side of the stick each side of the heat spreader goes on. So luckily this Corsair has a DDR4 stamp on one side, and I know that that goes with number one, the Vengeance sticker, but it also goes on the side of the chips. Sometimes it's a lot harder to tell, and you may want to put something with a paint marker or some tape on the back so that you can keep them straight. But I do know that this side goes on the side with the chips, so what I'm going to do is take some thermal adhesive tape, and you can find this online. This is just some 20 millimeter by, I can't even remember the thickness. It's pretty thin stuff. But we just want to apply that to the back of our spreader. And we'll use an X-Acto knife to cut it off at the end. And then we can peel the backing and stick it onto our ram stick. You want to make sure you line it up the way it came off. These, basically there's a tab up here, part of the top of the heatsink that it sets against, and it pretty much lines up inside the side tabs. And every stick's going to be a little different, but they'll all have a way of lining themselves up. So we lined it up, and we're going to press that down so it adheres, and that's one side. On the back side, remember we had the foam for the spacer to make sure everything's set straight. Now some sticks, that stuff won't survive coming apart, or that is the actual adhesive on the back, so you've got to take it apart to get the back of the ram, the spreader cleaned up. What you can do to replace that, if you don't have a matching foam or something like that, you can actually build up extra layers of tape. And I've gone up to 4 or 5 layers of tape to get that thickness built up so it sets right. We're not worried too much about the heat transfer on the back because most of it's coming from the chips on the front. But you can just keep layering that up till you get a good enough thickness that everything sits square. Or I guess flat. Square's kind of isn't really a good measure on these. But we do have the foam, so all we've got to do is apply some tape. Same as the other side. And then cut this edge. So I totally missed where I wanted to cut it. So we'll cut it again. And we can peel the backing on that side. And we're going to line it up with the other side of our ram spreader, or heat spreader. We just want to make sure we get all these tabs on the top lined up so it doesn't look funny. And we'll press it down. Make sure it's nice and seated on that foam. That's got a little bit of a kink to it, probably because when we took it apart, we pulled some foam off with it. But it's not so bad. And there you go. That's put together. Now we can put our sticker on, or decal, I guess we should call it. I am going to add a bit of super glue to this just because even though there's still some adhesive, I don't want it falling off ever. So a couple little splotches of glue. And we can go ahead and put it on the spreader. And there we go. We've got a nice color change on our RAM. It's going to match our system perfectly. I guess that's all I've got for you all today. So until I see you all next time, get out there and mod something.